allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'll read the ethics statement. Board members are reminded that it is our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this advisory board. Does any member of the advisory board know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before us at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record. If during the course of the meeting you become aware of any actual or apparent conflict of interest, please bring the matter to the attention of the chair. It will then be your duty to abstain from participating in discussion on the matter and from voting on the matter. I'm going to bring my own conflict to my attention and to all of your attention on the RTCA amendment request. I'm not going to participate in that discussion. Okay. Also, I want to take a moment to recognize all of our teachers this week across the state. It is Teacher Appreciation Week. I know some people may celebrate that on a different week, but I believe this week is the National Teacher Appreciation Week. I was up early and cooked breakfast for my entire staff this morning, but we want to make sure that we take a second to acknowledge for all our teachers that are not listening because they're actually teaching, but for all our fans in China, as Stephen likes to say. And reflect in the minutes that we recognize and acknowledge our teachers across the state working in charter schools and all schools for all their hard work. All right, at this time, our mission statement is to ensure the existence of high-quality charter schools in North Carolina, and at this time we'll hear any discussion and hopefully a motion on the April minutes. All good? All right.
Should we accept them? It's from April.
All right, it's been moved and
Second.
Linda Lynn second. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, all opposed? Great. We approve the April minutes, and this time we will hear from Dr. Amy Jablonski from who heads up our integrated academic and behavior systems about MTSS support and the PowerSchool implication updates.
Excellent. Well, good morning. Hello. Happy Monday. So the purpose of today is to talk about, really update you on what we're doing with a large system in the agency called the Every Child Accountability Tracking System. The acronym, because we have to have one, is ECATS. And this has three components to it. I'm going to walk through, but talk to you really about what the state board passed last week about putting one component as another mandatory piece that we use across the state in all of our schools. So I'm going to walk you through and familiarize yourself with really what is ECATS, why we're doing it, talk really about the early warning system component, and then the statewide implementation plan to support all of our schools with this. So for some common language and historical context, ECATS has three components. It's an outside vendor. The vendor who got the RFP is Public Consulting Group, PCG. Been working with them for over a year now to have all three of these parts work in an integrated way. One part is the special education component, and that means that all of our students are going to be able to have their IEPs, or individualized education plans, in one system. Right now there's multiple options, but it gives one system. I'll talk a little bit about that. Another component is service documentation I'll talk about, and then the MTSS, or multi-tiered system of support. I do want to preface this by all of this is free. Not fake free, but real free, as it is, which all these modules are like the Cadillac version. It's not a very basic model that you would want to do a lot of add-ons, where those are coming with it. So ECATS is comprised of three integrated modules, and our end users, our teachers, administrators, deans, will just sign on with one sign-on like they do right now for other components that we have and the state. and it has a direct interface with PowerSchool. So that means, and some other sources within DPI that I'm learning about as well, but this means that our data will come directly from PowerSchool into ECATS, and I'll talk about some other sources we're pulling from too. And so there's no double entry for things like student name, birth date, demographics, things of that nature. We're using the already set forth authoritative source of PowerSchool to make things easy and also to have the same information. We don't want to have conflicting information in either of these sources. And so PowerSchool is the authoritative source. And I'll talk about the data sets that's coming in particularly. And the goal, at first it started to think about helping our students with special education or having disabilities, and now we're able to think about all students, all 1.6 million. So the special education module, back in March of 2006, became part of what the agency has called the Unified Education Reporting System, or UERS. And this is saying basically everybody has to use this. And back in March 2016, the state board passed for every kid who has a disability for their IEPs and their progress monitoring to be put in this one system. That way, as kids move from LEA to LEA, school to school, we're able to make sure that their services are well documented and we don't have any lapses at all. And what the special education module focused on is helping people walk through to build IEPs with compliance. So we don't have so many compliance issues, which also then can turn into fiscal issues, really, if it's not fun with fidelity. And then that allows for the state to have a single reporting to the federal government for things that are needed. The service documentation component is optional for use. This component of ECATS allows for providers such as occupational therapists, physical therapists, audiologists, etc., to document the services that they performed with the student based on their IEP. And then what we're not providing is the functionality to bill. That's a whole different, that's not something that the state agency gets involved in with billing. But then every school can go ahead and bill for those services for Medicaid. And that actually allows you to get a good bit of money back. And so what we realized was that from an equity standpoint, there are a lot of people who, a lot of schools where they're having services, but they don't have a platform to document those in a way that then they could bill either through a third-party vendor or however they'd like to do that. That's optional, but it comes from this idea of equity that we want to make sure that we're providing. The part I want to really stay focused on for the remainder of the time is the multi-tiered system of support component. It has 3 different components to it. It has an early warning system, which the state board did put into effect to be part of the Unified Educated Reporting System just last week. Has intervention planning and analytics. And so it has all 3 components. The only component that we asked to be within the UERS is the early warning system. The other components are free. Users will have them, but we also realize that every school may have their own methodology of documenting interventions. If they want to do it within this platform, it will move with the students, but we didn't want to step on toes in that particular way. So let's talk about what an early warning system is and then what this will do. The purpose of an early warning system is to use different types of data coming together to identify students who are at risk of having adverse outcomes as early as possible. What it helps us do is change those trajectories. So if we know students are at risk, we can make adjustments to their experiences and provide interventions to change that. It also allows for schools to be able to look at trends over time. Are we struggling maybe like with attendance, or is it behavioral issues or literacy or math? And this is pre-K through 12. And so it allows for a school to have and provide the right intervention at the right time to the right students. So there's no guesswork as to where students may be off track. based on national research of what says that student may be off track. So an early warning system is comprised of different indicators. And these indicators are high levels of prediction that say a student would be off track for having adverse outcomes, really. It's kind of like when we go to the doctor, we know we get our blood pressure because that may be something that would cause us off risk. It's based on all research. There's no guesswork that goes into this particular thing. And what we have here, hey, Bill, is that, if you want to jump in, you know this project well too, is that to set these thresholds, we're doing statewide thresholds. So that's different because every school will not be setting their thresholds. We're using statewide because we want to make sure that students' level of risk is understood no matter where they move in North Carolina. Just like we don't have different blood pressure statistics because of where we live. It's the same. And these are grounded. So that way, to come up with these thresholds, we've partnered with national researchers, lots of research across the state also, and getting our feedback from our North Carolina implementers in general. So the system will be looking pre-K through 12, and in pre-K through 8th grade, these are the indicators we'll be looking at: attendance, discipline, literacy, and math. So within attendance, it'll pull in data from PowerSchool to say how many days or what percentage of days the student has missed for any reason. We're not talking about if excused or unexcused, because there's nothing in research that says because an excused absence that loss of instructional time is still not a risk factor. We're pulling in discipline data from PowerSchool. We know our research also shows that students who go to the office for any reason lose a significant amount of instructional time. Teachers lose instructional time, and the rest of the class does too. And so we're asking for people to put their discipline incidences into PowerSchool so that way it can trigger that particular warning. We are working with PowerSchool to change that screen to be more user-friendly. And then in literacy, we're pulling in grades, EOG scores, and the reason there's an asterisk with other is that within this RFP that we sent out is that we asked for this award winner, which is PCG, to partner with other third-party vendors that the field picked out. So for example, M-Class data would come right in if the charter school would like for that to do so. Things like iReady, STAR, MAP. We have 8 vendors that at no cost will be coming in that if districts are already or charter schools are already partnering with that vendor, we'll go ahead and move their data at no cost at all through a very secure process. And then in math, we have grades, EOG scores, and again, other is if they're using any of those same screeners, or what the state has put out for free as well for math screening, we'll pull in as well. And so this becomes a very robust system for pre-K through 8th grade. In 9th grade through 12th grade, we're still looking at attendance and discipline, but now we're looking at other factors instead of literacy and math in isolation that we know research has said we need to look at for our 9th through 12th grade. Things like grade point average, course failures, end of course tests. And so all of that was required for graduation will come into from PowerSchool into ECATS and then allow for it to fire these triggers within the early warning system. I also wanted to point out that not only will the benchmark data from a third-party vendor like M-Class come in if the charter school chooses it to do so, but you can go ahead and do your progress monitoring if you're using it in M-Class, like teachers are used to, and that will come into the intervention planning side. There's no double entry whatsoever, and so but the LEA, the districts and charter schools go ahead and determine which ones they want to use. So the early warning system will go ahead and organize all this data. This is what makes it different than any other data source that we have right now. It's taking all these components of data that we have and putting it into one interface. So that way we can look at from the individual student to an aggregate level, such as a grade level, a school level, or a department level, whatever it is, to see where we might have gaps over time. So this is kind of what a dashboard would look like right here. When a high-level school user would use, it would be taking a look at the percentage or number of kids receiving supplemental and intensive interventions in certain areas. It'd be looking to see overall a percentage of kids that are off track. But I really want to get into the grade level view, because this is where, from a grade level view, our classroom teachers and then also school level users will have great ability to do some strong problem solving. These grade level views come from PowerSchool to start with. So it'd be a teacher has these kids, that's how this gets populated to start with, but then you can build any type of groups that you want at a school level. So you might have somebody who works with a bunch of kids like in counseling, or you might have somebody who's working because you have someone coming in to work in interventions of some sort. You can build groups that are outside of what comes in from PowerSchool too. But just to orient you, this is a 5th grade view. At the very top of this, what PCG has done is kept roll-ups at the very top. How is all of 5th grade doing? So at the grade level view, as an administrator, I can see how all of 5th grade is doing in the area of attendance, behavior, literacy, and math. So we have, I can't see it from here, 40-something% of kids who are on track in attendance. We have a lot of kids, I can see green, are on track in behavior. We're off track in literacy and math as an entire grade level. And then those below that is where we have different classes. So how is the first class doing? Well, they're all on target. So we might have one class, maybe the water was just a bit off and the mix of kids is just a little bit challenging at that particular time. Maybe there's a certain cohort, or maybe it's, who knows what the factors are, but it might just be one classroom we need to intervene on, maybe not the entire grade level. Might be somebody who's new to the profession and still trying to figure things out. And so we can look by actual class and the grade level. A classroom teacher would see this. What they see is how their entire class is doing as a whole at the top, in attendance, behavior, literacy, and math, and then all of their individual students. And so if we take a look at somebody like Test Abby, that first one across, Test Abby is doing great in attendance, behavior, and is good. Literacy, we're having some significant, because it's red. And then math, again, we're struggling some. You'll see some letters there. Those letters connect directly to the intervention planning component of this platform. So if a student is receiving a supplemental, or like, let's say, so a little bit of support, and you're using the intervention planning, if you take a look at Test Abby in math, she has a supplemental intervention plan. And the progress monitoring is questionable right now. There may not be enough data points to know how it's going. So what's happening, if schools choose to use intervention planning, it connects here on this platform. So we're not looking for individual pieces of paper. Where's that folder? Who has that kid's progress monitoring? We're into one platform. Somebody like, if we take a look at, let's see, Test Angela across, Test Angela and Behavior has an intensive intervention plan with a question mark. We're not quite sure how it's going, but that red exclamation point means that we're off, we missed time. We missed a date to put in progress monitoring data. And so everything's right here. So that way, if we're going through as an administrator or classroom teacher, all these components happen to be here. But again, how's everybody doing in the area still is at the top. We don't want to lose sight of that. And because each of these indicators have certain data sets that come in, a classroom teacher can just pop, or anybody can pop on that little arrow, and it does a pop-out screen for what is included in this data set. Like, what data is coming together to fire this particular trigger? Why is it this color? Why is it this? And so it's right there. We don't have to, again, go to another data source to find it. It all comes in together to help us make sense of various data sorts coming together. We have high levels of data security within this project with our internal data management group, our work with Department of Information Technology, and obviously the vendor we're working with, we're following their prescribed data security protocols. So this implementation plan is helping us meet this particular statute that we have, right? That within GCS, you can read the number, we're asking that all LEAs identify students who are at risk of academic failure as early as possible and not having to wait for summative tests. And this allows us to do that work. So we know within the first couple days of school, within the first month of school, we know a big indicator is if a kid has been absent 10% of the days, which would be like, let's say 3 days in that first month, or even less than that, then we know that they're at risk of being chronically absent. We have that data now that within the first little bit of days instead of having to wait. So we're rolling this out through our MTSS cohorts. I will say that we have, Dave, I know I gave you the number, like 109-ish charter schools involved in MTSS cohort within 1 through 4. And it's 1 through 5, excuse me. The majority of them are in cohort 5. So what we're doing is we're rolling this out so we can have plans supported. So we do have some charter schools within cohorts 1 and 2, and they will receive training this fall, so that way they can begin using the system in the fall. We have a few charter schools in cohorts 3 and 4. They'll get access in the winter. And then cohort 5 will have access in the spring. And then we'll have another plan for any remaining charter schools that have not joined a cohort. When we'll turn it on, it will be around that springtime. But this helps from the state perspective for us to align our supports to be able to support all schools within the state of North Carolina.
Amy,
Yes.
should that be winter of 2018?
We're going to go January, so we're going to keep it.
Okay.
Yeah. The thought of December made me shake my head. I was like, we got to go January. We got to go January.
That was part
Yeah,
of it.
so we're going to use that particular part.
Okay.
And so we've been communicating a lot. You can click on these links. There's newsletters, a video clip that talks about the early warning system off of charter schools that keeps sending out communication for us so people know it's coming. We go ahead and do live demos of the site for anybody who wants to do a live demo so that way they can see what it does. We don't just talk about technology, we pair it with content. How can this help you do problem solving? We're really just mirroring what we do already for our professional development. And so people who are within cohorts for MTSS implementation, it just complements what they've been doing in professional development. There's no contradictions. It allows for them to put things into practice. We're going to be creating screencasts, videos, guidance documents. All of our coordinator meetings next year, this coming fall, will be aligned with implementation of ECATS, so that way they're going to get more support. And then we have our state thresholds. We'll be doing some analyzing of aggregate data and match that with our implementation data, and that way we can support schools. The early warning system does allow for us to identify kids who are at risk as early as possible. Putting this in the UERS means that every kid will be part of it. If we didn't, then it would just be an opt-in, which then makes it our most fragile learners at risk if a school didn't opt in, because they would go from a non-opt-in to an opt-in, but then they wouldn't have any data to be there for them. And so this allows for all of the data to be there, so that way schools can problem solve. And again, this doesn't prescribe what to do. It just provides alerts that this student may be at risk in these certain areas. They may have missed a lot of school or spent time in the office. They may be behind in these different areas of literacy or mathematics. And then in the higher grades, other components as well. So we have our contact information. I put Bill's up there as well because anything about the special education or the service documentation is definitely his wheelhouse when it comes to the MTSS side for intervention planning or the early warning system. Go ahead and reach out to me. So I want to leave time for questions. I don't know what my time is. Dan, I have no idea. Okay. Yes.
So where will teachers access this? Through ECATS, or will it be on the Power School? You know how they have the login with all the different...
Yeah, there'll be actually an ECATS little button when they go log in like they do everywhere else to log in. There'll just be a new widget that says ECATS, and they'll sign in with the same single signer interface that they already do.
Excellent.
Yeah, so it's not a hunt and peck, please let me know what the website is, nothing like that.
That's great.
And then that same user gets them, that same login if they're working with a kid who has a disability. It's not like you have to get out of the system, get back in, and everything is based on user types.
So the, I guess, former CCAS portion, special ed teachers would log in the same area, that they would only have access to.
Yeah, and so everything will be locked down just for access. So case managers or EC teachers, they'll just, instead of putting it in CCAS, or if they were using something different, it'll be in ECATS and that special ed component. And other people who could be part of the IEP team would also have access to that. Everything's just based on what role that person has in that association with the student.
So I guess I'm wondering, like with the early warning system, if a student is special ed and he's in my classroom, what access, would it just pull that data for me and kind of assimilate it so that it's...
Yeah, so I'll go back to this screen here that has the classroom view. Right here. So you see where it says student and like the black above test Abby, there's a black student writing. If a teacher clicks on that, another pop out comes that will say like the student's grade, some of their demographics, if they have an IEP.
Okay.
Yeah, and then a gen ed classroom teacher would have a read-only access to a student's IEP, so that way they know what the IEP is if they're working with that student. So their accommodations, their modifications, without having to run around and try to like hand folders and what's the paperwork, everything again by access.
That's great, because, you know, we have difficulty, or somebody say, I didn't get a copy of so-and-so's IEP, and then you've always got, you know, my high school students where they're changing each semester. You've got all these IEPs floating around. It just worries me.
So this allows for that to be much more streamlined to, again, make sure that our students are getting what they need without relying on, did that paper get somewhere? Did that person do that? Right? Because life happens in the way.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Sounds powerful.
We are the first state to be doing this statewide. So that's pretty cool. We're the first state to do something pre-K through 12 with state thresholds to make sure we're catching kids as early as possible. Yes.
I'm very good at playing the devil's advocate
Okay,
now and
yeah.
then. And I've expressed this concern to Jason and Tiffany. Given that we're the first state implementing this, what securities and safeguards are being discussed? Because this is a lot of public available data of every student in our state in one centralized place. I have a real concern about that. I think a lot of people around the state do as well.
Yeah, so let me put some context to the first state. There are many states doing this already, and they're doing it either just in a school district or maybe just certain grade levels. We're expanding it pre-K through 12. The authoritative source of this data is PowerSchool. So that's where the data is coming from. Putting it into one place like this allows us to make sense of it. The amount of data security, DIT and DMG and our legal staff has made sure that the level of security and how data travels is to the highest level because for that reason. So this data is already, it's in PowerSchool. So there's no changing of it or anything like that. It's a view access only. So instead of having to go to this screen or this screen or this screen, it puts in one face. But our legal team has guided us as well as DIT and DMG to make sure. And they would not let us move it, I promise you, a minuscule of a decision unless everything has been checked off and tested. The amount of testing that's happening here at DPI and at PCG with the data is robust at the very least.
What information is you may have said this and I missed it, but the markers, the stop signs for literacy, and is that EOG data? Yeah,
so on this right here, so for pre-K through 8th grade, for literacy grades that are in PowerSchool, EOG scores that are already loaded, and then other, if a charter school is already working with another vendor and they want that to pull in, that will pull in, and then it'll do a combined threshold.
And what if you don't use PowerSchool for grades?
So my understanding and learning from Roz here is that, and I have to get double checked on this, but she said that final grades, F1s, have to be in PowerSchool. But they're called F1s, that wasn't me saying that. So if it's not in PowerSchool, we can't get it. So we're not, this is based on, and the reason for that is that because PowerSchool is the authoritative source.
That was one of the reasons we asked Dr. Jablonski to come here today, Mr. Quigley.
I mean, we do. I just know that, what's that?
Excuse me. That's one of the reasons we asked Dr. Jablonski to come today, because we had a conversation when she was with one of our cohorts of charter schools, and in one of the charter schools said, well, what happens if we don't put things in Power School? How are we going to have access to this data? And so I think the bigger discussion is how should charter schools use Power School? What should we mandate, if anything? I know we have a lot of our charter school leaders that only use Power School for the minimum, putting in final grades and attendance.
Yeah.
And some use it for everything. For MTS, and Dr. Jablonski can speak this much better than I can, but for our schools who totally use the early detection and everything that they've been trained in MTSS, if their information is not in Power School, they don't have access to this data. So that's the bigger discussion about this.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we make that decision today, or do we want to make a decision, but for Dr. Jablonski's department to be able to support our schools in MTSS cohorts, the more data that's in there, the better you can support. Did
I would
say that
just-
correctly?
I mean, yeah, so I don't think every charter school uses Power School at all for the grade book function.
Right, correct.
I know that they have to have them in when they exit to high school.
They have to have them for final grades in attendance.
That's my understanding from both Roz and Alexis. To get the financial piece of it is the attendance piece.
Yeah, the attendance,
And then
obviously.
final grades, yeah.
Well, and out of school suspensions have to be in there
Right.
as well.
And we had just even our traditional schools don't put all their discipline data right now in Power School. They a lot of times partner with a third-party vendor, and so that's a big switch for them because we can only pull from Power School. But again, it's about how can we problem solve.
Yeah, so that was my next question. Like, what do we consider discipline data?
So our recommendation is that anytime a kid goes to the office, that's an office discipline referral. And what that does is we can account those. We know, like, again, not a mandatory thing to do. We have plenty of people just do out-of-school suspension or reportable offenses. What we know from research, right, if a kid goes to the office, they lose about 45 minutes of instructional time. And so that just helps us problem solve why a kid may have educational gaps if they're missing instructional time. And then also from a school perspective, you know, what is an office discipline referral? Somebody it's chewing gum, somebody you have to draw blood, right? And so getting some calibration in a school is just a recommendation so the kids aren't having to guess, but that's on a school to choose.
Yeah. If I was a school, I'd be a little concerned about putting all of that data in Power School just because the type of thing that at one school that could result in a removal or referral might be far different than at another school. And I think it's hard to kind of qualify those things across all the different settings, kind of like you're describing.
Oh, most definitely. And the only thing that we're actually still the same view, only administrators can actually see the office discipline referral in Power School and in ECATS. So the teacher would just see a yellow, a green, or a red. That's a trigger of number of office discipline referrals and suspensions, but does not know what those incidences are.
Yeah.
That's still protected. This actually, discipline data came as a larger conversation in the agency where we found out that discipline data was not moving from one school district to another in Power School. And that became a red flag for especially our students with disabilities who have out-of-school suspensions. We weren't moving, so a kid can move to a new LEA, and you wouldn't know they've already had 7 days out. You know, when do you need to do a manifestation? And this became a much larger issue for protecting our students, especially those with disabilities.
And that brings up the concern about the litigious society that we're in today, where, we've got information out there, discipline information, that folks are going to demand public records, or the court's going to demand that student personal records from 10 years old are released for court cases. I just think it's a slippery road. I remember the good old ABCs of education. Who remembers what the C stands for? Anybody?
Local control.
Local control. I mean, we're centralizing 1.5 million kids in one data bank. I just have real concerns about that.
I know that Eric's been a good thought partner in making sure that we're following those things. Again, Power School is the authoritative source. And again, schools can do what they would like to do with the discipline, or then be understanding what triggers that. We're not asking for a mandate to put this discipline data in PowerSchool for everything. We have a lot of people, again, who've used third-party vendors. But then when we think about, what we're pulling, it's the same thing. We put grades in, attendance, all of that. So I hear your concern completely. And so again, every charter school can put in what it is that they would like to do, but it's where the data's pulling from. So what will trigger that will come from there.
What about from a research perspective? Because I would imagine, this would be a gold mine for people wanting to research and, write, kind of make policy decisions and proposals based upon what's in this data. Just, having it all centralized and really been passed down kind of methods for running schools based on what's in this, which, sometimes are helpful and sometimes are not. How does it work? How is it going to be shared or not shared? If I'm someone who wants to have access to the aggregate information to do research, how does that?
So we keep going back to that PowerSchool is the authoritative source. So we wouldn't be sharing this data, any data that we would go through the traditional ways of doing it. We've gotten questions like, what if somebody gets data from the early warning system, right, placed in ECATS, different than PowerSchool is the authoritative source. Mm-hmm. That's where it all comes from. And so, or that third-party vendor, like Amplify, that's their data. It doesn't belong to ECATS. The only piece that does, that's the authoritative source, is the IEP. ECATS is the authoritative source for IEPs, not PowerSchool. So that is not something that this system does at all.
And Linda Lynn has a question, and then to be clear, everything is going to be pulled from CCAS over into the new ECAT system. That's correct. Automatically, so that as long as you're in CCAS, it's going to be pulled in.
Yeah, the dark period, we're calling it, where everything is going to be shut down for the transfer, starts June 16th. And basically at that point in time, everything will move over into ECATS that was in CCAS. We're actually testing all that right now. We had 3 or 4 meetings last week looking at the data, making sure that we have ways to clean the data to make sure that it's correct when it gets over. We'll probably come up in and around July 9th. And basically that coincides with what PowerSchool does every year, where they shut down as well. And when they come up, we'll come up and be ready to go. But I did want to go back to the question. The reason I stood up was the question you asked about the research and then also about the safety of the data. When we started this process, which was almost now 3 years ago, the primary piece we wanted to be able to do was to give schools and charter schools and LEAs the opportunity to use data at a different level and with a broader reach. And that's really what the process is. We pull aggregate reports at the state level, and so we're not going to be looking to create policy out of that, to create those other issues, looking at change directly from the state. It's primarily what we've tried to do, because we're driven by federal law, results-driven accountability, RDA, to make sure that LEAs have data that they've never had before. And that's the primary piece there. And then FERPA basically protects children's rights, and the concerns you have right now, an attorney can come and get that information now by writing, going to the courts and getting the appropriate paperwork. But primarily, this is as protected, if not more protected, because of what we've done to make sure the security is there than any data that's presently out there right now. So I really think we've tried our best to safeguard and again do what we could do. But if you look at it and get in it and look at it, you'll see where the process is. The process is at the local level. To make sure that y'all have data that you've never had before and that you can use it to problem solve for kids.
Okay.
Thank you.
Linda?
I've got like 3 or 4 questions, so I'm going to try to put them all together. Is this part of the P20W? I mean, how will this feed into the longitudinal data collection?
You know, we haven't talked about that in general because, again, it's the authoritative source. It's not the authoritative source. So we're not changing any pieces there. But have you had conversations with Stacy or Maria about that?
With Carl.
Okay.
Over time. And this, again, they've got set data pieces that they're looking at. They will pull from that if they need to from the special ed side. They may pull something out. But again, Amy's material, all of that's coming straight out of PowerSchool. So whatever sources of data they're already looking at are in PowerSchool, and whatever the new SIS would be if PowerSchool changed over to somebody else. And so they would be pulling from there. They're not coming back to our system to pull. As she said, we're not the authoritative source.
I'm just going to remind everybody here at the table, that's pre-kindergarten, 20th year school, and 5th year in the workforce, a data collection of all that. So it'd be interesting to see what part of this is shared with that eventually, because it's all together. Your cost on that, and I'm sure some here at the table here will understand, PowerSchool is free for certain parts of it. Then there's a cost to it.
I'm not a PowerSchool expert to be thinking of that, but there are components of that in just overall home base. There's the base model, and then more. Anything that I've said here is part of the free version of PowerSchool. I don't know if I'm calling, version is not the right word. Do not quote me on that. It is the free components, no add-ons needed. It is the base use of PowerSchool.
Okay, so they won't have to.
No, you don't have to upgrade PowerSchool or do anything to PowerSchool to have it. That's exactly how it comes.
Okay, and that will continue. They're not looking at charging LEAs or schools or anything.
I have not heard anything, but I'm not the. Bill, you're just in all these conversations. I love it.
It is free.
Okay.
There's a base product that we built all the way across on the special ed side, the service documentation, and so everything inside that base product is free. What we have done by doing that is freeing some money up that people are presently spending on systems out there. So if they want to go above and beyond and get a 504 plan or EL plan, they want to do other pieces to gather more data around certain other elements of their population, they're free to do that. We've got a change process in place to make sure that whatever the changes are don't have an impact on the system. And pretty much they're already inside the structure that exists. So again, from a security point of view, they're already behind firewalls, and they use the same movement structures that they need to make sure that they ensure that everything's safe. But it's free.
So the version of PowerSchool that is free is still free with these coming in, and then ECAPS is free.
Okay, so that would be your enrollment or attendance, your discipline,
Yep.
as much as it's what schools want to put in it.
Correct.
And they don't have to put everything in.
It's all choice.
It's all choice on that. Okay.
Yep.
All right, in pre-K through 2nd grade,
Yep.
what academic data are you putting in there since there's no EOGs?
Right. So we are pulling in. So if they're using a third-party vendor,
Which is DIBELS or MClass?
yep, and they want to, we will move that in and set the thresholds, but it's the same that's there. Grades, if they're using grades, will come in. So in those particular pre-K, pre-K, the big focus of pre-K will be attendance and discipline, because those are the two major factors that set off risk. But if they have any type of academic data they would like to put in, they can. We also have built in what's called an assessment book, where if you have other assessments that you're using, you can actually hand enter the scores in to have it populate if you choose to do that. And so we'll work with every charter school, see what data they have, and help guide them.
All right, and is there a parent portal in PowerSchool? I believe there is.
In PowerSchool, there's a parent portal.
Can the parent see all the disciplinary reports that are in that?
No.
So the parent cannot see what's been written about the child in the
They
district?
can request it from the administrator. That goes to for security purposes. That the parent portal, I'm not saying, when you reach out and put that extended out there, that is not something that's in the parent portal. You cannot see that. You'd have to go to the school and request that to see it. And that's to make sure we protect students.
Okay. Do we know if parents have taken advantage of that? Do parents know they can take advantage of that? Is there any communication to the parent to say, if you want to see your child's what's been written on the child's disciplinary reports, you have to come in?
A lot of schools send them home with kids when it happens that day, but I mean, that is a communication thing that can be increased if the school is using any type of discipline to put it in. They can do that. A lot of people just obviously print it out and send it home that day or mail it home, things of that nature.
I want to be careful using individual stories, but I do have an individual story I want to share with you about. A kindergarten, I think it was first grader, drew a picture of somebody, shooting a gun, and that was put into the child's disciplinary report. It was not until the parent came in and asked to see that, and then it took the parent about 3 weeks to see that. And I think we need to be very careful what we put in.
Yes.
We're not going to give parents immediate feedback on what's written in there.
I agree wholeheartedly and support immediate feedback, and also I would have rather seen that parent been called and told what was in there already when the incident happened. That was the practice that we advise.
Right.
Also, when a person writes when you type information in, that doesn't get moved. So it's what we're pulling is just what was the incident. Like, there's only a list of things that it's a drop-down menu.
Okay.
And then what was the consequence? Suspension, parent conference. It's no narrative. If there were other kids around, none of that's in there. That comes into, what we need is a tick mark of the number of times a kid goes to the office, because then that's instructional time loss. Then our out-of-school suspension, in-school suspensions, even though we've seen out-of-school suspensions drop, we've seen in-school suspensions rise. So we haven't solved the problem. You're still missing instructional time because you're not getting that instruction. So again, just to problem solve. But that level of detail, there's no interest in that. That's at the school between the parent and the teacher and everybody else.
I think that's kind of what you just stated is actually an important nuance there, because in-school suspension or referral or removal or things like that, again, can be a better situation. I have students that when we've removed them, they're actually going to be more productive in a different environment.
Yeah.
But it could go in as an office referral in kind of a less nuanced description, right? So then we're equating that to an out-of-school suspension. They're like radically different.
Yeah, so they're not going to be, if a student gets, let's say, a parent conference, let's just say that's not going to trigger the early warning system and be, wow, this kid's definitely at risk. It'll be like the uptick of office discipline referrals. But if a kid's out of school suspended, that's a high risk factor, as you well know, that would trigger it more. So it's not, the only consequence that's really weighted is the out of school suspension. The others just come from number of times, kind of like number of times a kid fails a test, get more and more and more at risk. One failure is not going to be totally at risk.
Right.
And that's kind of, and again, baseline basic data to just keep that tick mark going, just like we do other things, like attendance.
Just a side note too, another story. I was talking to a school. Your name came up,
Okay.
and the school said they so much enjoyed working with you.
Oh,
You were
good.
Awesome to work with, and
Great.
they just really appreciate how well you serviced the school. So thank you.
Thank you for that feedback. I'm very thankful to have such a strong division of brilliant, kind people who speak so highly of the charter school community and finding ways to continue to reach out and support, and that's part of our work here. The majority of charter schools are coming on in the spring, and so we offer free demos. Well, everything's free, but we offer demos. We can do a virtual demo of the system. If anybody wants to see it, I'd be happy to do so, to take a look at it. And we've done recordings and webinars people have had access to. But any way that we can meet your needs, just let us know. I'll be happy to do so. I appreciate the time, always,
Great,
and the
thank you.
opportunity. Let me know, or Bill, who apparently knows more than I do. I think it's the gray hair. About a lot of components. So yeah, but thank you, and let me know if you have any questions. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. We know this is a massive undertaking. We appreciate all that you're doing to take it on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, all right, so we're a little bit behind, but we're gonna keep trucking.
Performance committee can make it up.
Important discussion. So State Board of Education updates from Director Machado.
First, I'm going to ask Dr. Keebler Williams to come up and give a report on the Ready to Open process. We'll need a recommendation from you to take to State Board of Ed for the next meeting. So, Dr. Williams?
So that was my first question. That's not on e-board, it's just a hard copy?
Just a hard copy.
Okay,
We're going
no
to be
problem.
very low-tech this morning.
No problem. I like paper.
I can make notes if I can find a pen.
Hi, darling.
Dr. Williams?
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Keebler Williams, and I am the Office of Charter Schools liaison for all of the schools that are in their planning year and working through the Ready to Open process. It may interest you to know that come this August, I will have been directly involved in the opening of 71 charter schools in North Carolina. And so I am happy to be before you this morning, and hopefully that I can answer any questions that you have about the schools that are opening in 2018. The first thing I'd like to draw your attention to is the enrollment summary, the long sheet of paper that you have. You will notice from this summary, and you saw the first part of it at your April meeting as a result of the information that schools shared in March, and then the second part of it is here for you at your May meeting as a result of information that the schools shared in April. So 7 of the schools have enough applications to fill the seats that they have projected, and 6 of the schools are currently below the 75% enrollment threshold that we expect by June 1st. But they are all moving and working hard every day to get to at least that 75% by June 1st. The next enrollment report will be due from the schools on May 25th, along with part 2 of the Ready to Open progress report. So for this the first 2 enrollment summaries, the one that you received in April and the one that you are receiving today, we are essentially tracking applications, looking to make sure that they have enough student interest to eventually fill their seats. Starting with the May enrollment report, we will no longer be asking for the number of applications, but instead asking for the number of actual enrollments and looking to see that they are actually filling the seats that they have projected to fill for their first year. So I'll pause here and give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you might have about the enrollment summary before we go on to the facility update.
The Apprentice Academy, I believe, isn't that the dropout prevention? So they wait to work with the schools on, is that why they're as low as they are?
I don't think that's,
Oh,
No,
it's
but-
not
no, that's
just
one of
low.
the
The
kind of
vocational
vocational.
school.
They're just low.
vocational?
Now, they were an accelerated,
Yes,
They
they
were,
were one that came
yes.
for previously.
Right.
We accelerated them this year.
Is there,
In fact, they just got approved.
yeah,
What?
it just got approved.
Yes. Dr. Williams, what does it mean, Will, with Mountain Island Day, will withdraw, redraw partial lottery?
So we discovered in Mountain Island Day's first enrollment report that they had given enrollment priority to students who were not were not eligible for that priority. There was some discrepancy between who were board members and who were not, and so therefore we are now asking that they redraw part of their lottery, and they're going to do that this week on Thursday. And what I mean by part of it, instead of doing all of it, the students, their original lottery was on March 8th, and all of the students except for those, and there were 33 students who received enrollment priority that should not have. So all of the students minus those 33 who gained enrollment into the school through the March 8th lottery will continue in their current enrollment status. But any student that was placed on the wait list as a result of that March 8th lottery and those 33 students who received enrollment priority that should not have will be a part of a new lottery.
And if I may just chime in, Eric Snyder here from Legal. It is sort of a new process, but I think of it as more of a continuation of the March 8th lottery by pulling in those who should have been part of that initial draw. So it's not really a new lottery so much as it's a continuation of the March 8th lottery with the same set of students who were eligible at that time to be drawn out.
So it's the 33 that got in, and then all the wait lists.
Yes.
What kind of action do we need to take other than, I mean, I look at some of these and some of them are down, but, as we've seen sometimes, May, June is when they really blow up in their enrollment. I mean, is there, what are you looking for from us?
I'm looking for you a preliminary recommendation that these schools move on through the Ready to Open process to be ready to open in July or August, whatever their first day of school is.
Dr. Williams, based on your interactions with the schools, do you have any major concerns with any of these?
I don't have any major concerns. There are certainly some red flags that you see here on the enrollment summary. But I had some red flags at this time of year, have had red flags at this time of year with schools in prior years, and they've always, in most cases, they have bounced back. And if they haven't bounced back, then they have requested a delay.
Okay. So based on your kind of assessment, I'm going to Director Machado.
What we're hoping for is as Dr. Williams said, a preliminary recommendation on these slate of schools, so we can take it to the state board in June for discussion, and then a final decision to be in July, so we don't have to take it in July as action on first read, similar to the way we did with the accelerated schools. And if there's something happens between now and in that July meeting, we would certainly pull those.
So we'll be looking
based on your
this
recommendation, we would pull those schools back.
So this is really just a process thing so that we can get it on the state board agenda,
Right.
but we could make different recommendation right beforehand. Okay,
Absolutely.
Well then I move that these schools continue in the Ready to Open process.
I'll second.
All right. Properly moved and seconded. Discussion?
I think it might be prudent that maybe put some stipulations on, say, any school that's below 50% as of June, that maybe they have to submit to the Office of Charter Schools a revised budget. I know we found ourselves in that situation where we weren't getting updated budget information on schools that were significantly under enrollment. So, I think that could be something where they're on alert that if you don't meet at least 50% by June 1, by July, we need to see a revised budget. How are you going to make that work in the budget numbers? Is that
Well,
something that
Mr.
we wanna-
Mimoni, if I just,
Yeah.
one point of clarification. So we
Sure.
do currently require that they be at 75% by
Okay.
June 1. And we
Okay.
do also require that they submit, as part of the Ready to Open progress report, a break-even budget.
Good.
And so that will be due to the Office of Charter Schools on May 25th. So in light of that, tell us how you'd like for us to proceed.
Well, I just think we'd have to be alert to if they submit that budget and still try to hold on to their old numbers, expecting they're gonna get that, they have to submit a second budget. That's, if we don't, here's how we're gonna make it work. I would assume that's how they're doing it now?
Yes. And
Okay.
we've discussed that any school that falls into that category,
Right.
they would either come before CSAB in the June meeting, or they could come virtually to you. So that is our plan.
Okay.
So if they don't meet that 75% threshold, we'll ask them to come either virtually or.
Yeah, it sounds like that's something we can do on a
covered.
case-by-case basis and that
Yeah.
it's, for the most part, covered.
Okay.
Yeah, it's still, I mean, we're looking at April numbers now. There's still a few more months and a lot of stuff can happen in those couple months.
You good?
I guess my question is, do they all have their facilities and working towards?
Next.
It's this next page on there.
Well,
Let's
that's
go to the
a
next
great
page.
segue right into the next pages, so thank you for that. So
We need to
two
vote on our
schools,
We need to vote on our motion?
Oh.
Yeah, we have a motion So do we want to wait until we talk about the facilities?
All right, wait.
So 2 schools have their certificates of occupancy so far, Apprentice and Next Generation. All of the others have identified their sites and are working through the necessary process to get an educational certificate of occupancy prior to opening. The one thing you will note about this facility update that's not reflected in the enrollment summary is that we received notification this weekend that Monroe Charter Academy will be requesting a delay. And so when you receive your May enrollment summary or your next enrollment summary, you will see Monroe Charter Academy moved from the list of the general list of schools and moved to the back page with the other schools that have requested and received a 1-year delay.
Okay.
Notice that Padilla Academy is asking to relinquish their charter. They have told us that via an email, but they have not given us all the documentation we need, so they do not plan on opening.
Which one?
Padilla Academy in Concord.
Oh, okay.
And I know I'm backtracking, Dr. Williams, I'm sorry. Discovery, did they get their permit?
So they won the last round of the hearings, but now the homeowners have 2 months to appeal. And they do not know now, they do not know at this time whether or not they will appeal or if they will just let things lie as they are.
And their builder says that if there's not an appeal, they can get the building done in that 1-year time frame. That's what
They
they're saying.
can't.
That's what they're saying.
Can't. And then they do not get another delay.
No. And they're all aware of that.
The Padilla Academy in Cabarrus, they're relinquishing their charter. Do we know why?
Yes. Their board chair resigned, who was the driving force behind that school,
Okay.
and the other board members, nobody was as passionate as she was.
Okay. All right, so motion has been to approve the ready to open report and recommend these schools for ready to open status to the state board. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. All right, the next item that we need to discuss is the performance framework update. You notice on the, what we need is the alternative charter schools what's the best way to say this? The alternative charter schools have been approved for an alternative accountability model. And we're requesting that on the performance framework that there be an additional section D17 where we'll be able to put in the results of their alternative accountability model. They will also have an A, B, C, D, or F score, but then D17 will be geared for an alternative charter school that's been approved for that accountability model, and we will list it at that place, at that section. We would.
Do you need a motion?
Need a
on
motion
that?
so I can take that to state
All
board.
right, I move that we add that section to the performance framework for alternative schools. Alternative accountability model schools. There we go.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor? Opposed? All right, motion carries.
Okay. The next thing we need a recommendation on is Thomas Academy has requested to become an alternative charter school. This is something that when they came before you, because they were low performing, you recommended, and they have finally got all the correct documentation and for the amendment process.
They're the one that had a lot of students living on campus.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was formerly,
Well, I move that we recommend to the state board that Thomas Academy be given alternative charter school accountability status.
I'll second that.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries.
So that'll give us 3 of those?
Yes,
So that will give us,
the ALS schools, yes. Okay. All right, and as far as state board updates, the 2018 charter school application recommendations were approved as per your recommendations. The 2018 proposed changes to the charter school application timeline process and charter agreement were approved. Lakeside Preparatory Academy's amendment request to change their mission statement was approved. And Lakeside Preparatory Academy is the former Thunderbird Prep. They have changed their name, and actually they requested to change it to Lakeside Charter Academy, which that amendment is being processed right now. It's all part of their rebranding to hopefully they can get their enrollment where they need to be. Franklin Academy's amendment request for their mission statement and learning outcomes was approved. Items 3 and 4 were moved to action on first read because they were pretty clear cut. They did discuss the recommendation for Raleigh Oaks Charter Schools enrollment increase, and they will vote on that at the next meeting. As far as OCS updates, we have 2 new consultants on board. Ashley Figueroa. Ashley will be handling CSAB State Board duties, and she's also on the risk assessment team and performance framework. That's Ashley. And then Dr. Danielle Allen. Danielle will be in charge of applications. She's also on the renewal and the performance framework team. So we're really happy to have both these very talented young ladies. So glad to have you on board. Other OC updates, renewal visits were done to Mountain Community Charter School, Thomas Jefferson Classic Academy, Raleigh Charter, Reaching All Minds, and South Brunswick Charter. Shonda, how many more? Oh, she just left. We're more than halfway through with all the renewal visits, and some will probably be moved to the fall because we have that many, and we had a little spell where we weren't able to get out there. The risk assessment visits were made by Dr. Williams. We're at Charlotte Choice, Aristotle Prep, and KIPP in Durham. The CSP federal grant was successfully submitted. 15 schools applied for it, and they plan to award 3 grants. And we're also being told that no state that had ever received it before is eligible. So we're hoping that's true. The New Leadership Institute is June 12th and 13th. That's the for all the schools that are getting ready to open in August, and any other school would like to take advantage of that. The transportation grant, almost all of the first semester reimbursements have been made. 47 schools applied, 41 qualified, $1,194,000. Well, 1.2 million in total disbursements, and that was an average disbursement of about $29,000 per school. We mentioned earlier that Padilla Academy is relinquishing their charter. Anybody that hasn't been to HR to fill out your I-9 form, please do that today. And we know that there's been some issues with your reimbursement not getting back in a timely manner. I can assure you that it is not our office's situation. There's some clarification between DPI and state audit office, whether on some of these travel reimbursements, so we apologize for that, and we are staying on top of it. Virtual charter school report, Danielle is working on that right now. Our timeline is in September, we will report to CSAB. In October, we'll take that report to the state board. In November, we'll ask for the state board to approve your recommendation. And in November, we'll submit that report to the General Assembly. CSAB is going to be making, we're also going to be asking that the 2 schools come and do a live demo of a class being in session in September. And I think we've notified both schools. I hope, Chris, I think you've been notified. We thought that would be a great way to for you to see a live class, and we also want to do the same thing at a state board meeting. As I mentioned earlier, Thunderbird Prep did ask for a name change, and I want to remind you that your July meeting is in conjunction with the North Carolina Association of Public Charter Schools, It's July 16th, and it's going to be in Sunset Beach. It's a Monday. The meeting should be from about 9 to 1. And in your notebooks, I put how to get a reservation at the hotel. You cannot go online to do it. You have to call this number right here. So,
Will we get our reimbursements quicker if we spend the night, even if we don't need to?
our office will do everything possible.
Just a quick note regarding the reimbursements. The legal department has been doing some wrestling and some research to try to get this moved along. We've been in contact with finance. We think we've got it resolved and have asked them to clear any backlog with respect to reimbursements. If you continue to have issues, send me a note and we'll move that forward. But there'll be some additional guidance to you all and other groups that receive per diems and submit travel and meal reimbursement in the coming weeks.
So,
And just for the renewal school, Ms. Machado, I just confirmed with Ms. Cooper that there are 6 schools of the remaining 30-plus schools that have to be visited for renewal.
so just for clarity, on the July meeting, we can submit for room and travel just as we would coming to Raleigh?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Yes, and they have extended the discount rate for a couple of days before and a couple of days after if you want to make a family vacation at the same time. And I'm also happy to announce that the Teacher of the Year for Charter School is Miss Courtney Samuelson, who teaches at the Capital Encore Academy in Fayetteville. She will be taking Deborah Brown's place. Had a really great visit, and we're really excited about her being involved in this situation. And then the State Employees Credit Union Scholarship update. The 3 charter school students that received that are a student from Community School Davidson, a school from Northeast Carolina Preparatory Academy, and a student from Pine Lake Charter. There was 13 schools submitted an application. We probably have 35 charter schools. You know, we're very disappointed that only 13 applications for a scholarship that is $10,000 annually. We have it in our newsletter, and any suggestions that you can give us on how we can engage our community more, we would really appreciate it, because this is a fantastic scholarship that we only receive a limited amount. So
I didn't have anybody going to a UNC school, so.
yeah, great guidance counselors make sure their kids, the students are aware of it. And we appreciate that.
What school did Miss Samuelson learn all her outstanding teaching strategies and develop as a professional?
I think she drove through Rutherford one time and saw Joe. No, she has the farm system of charter schools, Maureen Joy, under Alex Quigley. Yes.
And just so that you will know, the students who receive the scholarships from CQ and Ms. Samuelson, they will present to you at a later meeting, much like we do every year.
Great.
That
All right.
concludes my report.
Thank you very much.
Just about caught up.
All right, 10:15.
Now, this says performance committee, but it's really the policy committee stuff, right? Okay. You want to take a break?
Yeah, let's take a break.
'Cause
I think we're gonna be
get
all
through
right.
this in
Yeah,
like 30
we're gonna be good. Let's take a 10-minute break? Yeah. 15?
10:25.
15-minute break,
We'll be done by
10:30.
11.
Okay.
We'll be done by 11? Quick.
Most of these are easy ones, especially since I think we gotta punt the health one right off the bat.
And the licensure stuff too. Right?
We just-
Monday. That's when the official.
Yes, it is. That should be in your packet, in your notebook.
I think I must have done right now.
So that will get you the information. You might have to invite her to come to lead our strategic planning or something. Everything you're already,
Give you a hug.
when you finish?
So last day for students is May 30, and then, you know, summer is a whole new, you know, ball of wax, but we have, we probably have to push our calendar back a little bit. We're gonna start August 13th, but I don't know they'll deliver the building on time, so we'll see. We will, yeah. I will, thank you, that would be great, we'd love to have you.
How close are you to,
We're in Ashburn, so we're 5 minutes from the zoo.
Time Point home? Back Lincoln, traffic was so bad on 40.
I can't remember the model.
Ashboro and then get on 49,
Yeah.
which I love that.
I love that route.
So much better.
Isn't it great?
So where are you in relationship to that?
That corridor, we are 5 miles south of that road you were on. 64. Yep. And you can see us off the highway. If you were to just say, I want to go to the zoo, you would see the back of our building. Yeah.
Stop by sometime.
Yeah, you should. We'd love it.
Is it Anson the one that?
You doing, Kevin?
Pretty good, how you doing?
There's a facility there.
Got a facility. Oh, that facility is off the boom. School. It's so far away from Statesboro. Down by South Carolina. Oh yeah. It's like 10 miles. Statesboro would be 6. It's just an old school. I would think. I would think.
So reach is gonna have to be.
He's in DC. Yeah, I mean, on the board.
No. This was all crazy. That's not it?
No, that's not Addie. Teamwork.
Did that one ever open?
This one is associated with what? Lisa's. Just got a building this weekend.
This one was, they did accelerated probably. They already are school.
Questions over there? Supposed to be open.
It's only
15.
it's dropping out.
So now 14.
That's just Raleigh. That's good.
Anybody that fit it's a
This
new
is good for Lee. It's good on the story too.
This is the one that you guys approved. It's a really strong.
was a, second language one.
Two seconds. Two.
This area. Do that. It's just.
Heather, will you have your first graduating class next year?
Well, we've already had
Oh, have you?
third one.
Oh, very good.
Yes.
Okay.
Not really.
That's always fun.
Yeah, it is. And those high school kids can drive you crazy, but that graduation week is just you're so proud of them.
Just love them,
Yep.
you know, when they're coming across that stage. Especially ones you've had to really invest in and find all kinds of grace for.
Went to law school, Clemson, too?
Used to tell my kids, I said, you know, we're gonna work hard, but I can't work harder than you are. You know, you're gonna have to put a little effort in there.
Yeah, I probably should have.
I'm standing out there.
I really thought we were about
And they're like, I said, do you wanna get up?
Tennessee,
No.
and possibly South Carolina.
Don't step in that.
Tennessee,
As soon as you say that.
even they're out of state,
Jump in it.
He's messed up
Did,
so many clothes.
cheaper.
Dave made a snarky remark about me. School counselor.
Well, he said good school counselors make sure that they
I could have gone to South Carolina because I was a South Carolina resident at the time, but Clemson didn't have
So
one.
he was saying he was doing, that was a positive comment toward you.
They wanted one before.
There are a plethora out there
But-
that they will.
South Carolina wouldn't
So
have
just so,
that.
you know, last year I had one too, but I was in the.
So they have a private one now in Charleston.
Just don't know.
Couple of.
Now, what do you think? Keeping up?
Oh, at 3, one's going to lose. One's,
And they've got,
potential.
what are hooked up right now.
The CCP.
It's right behind it.
When he said your name, you were supposed to stand up and wave for us. Just not listening.
Ashley?
Everything that
When he said your name, you were supposed to stand
for
up.
this.
Now, are you the one that was the lawyer before you were a teacher? Or did you practice law?
NC pre-K, because you just
I
reminded me.
probably would have wanted to be a teacher. I practiced. My private practice was in Johnston County, just small town.
What are y'all talking? She does.
I probably did. It was about 80% criminal defense.
Oh, wow.
Which is
She fell out.
nothing ever shocks me or surprises me. After
Schools in
Johnston County shit, 3 years.
Oh, the NC pre-K. Sorry. And they do not give any information.
Hey, how are you?
Yeah, I don't know why we had to put a password on there all of a sudden.
Yeah.
This is the
And it changes every month. I guess part of DIT's security.
literally,
Don't get me started.
well, they're called
Do you hear,
started.
that RFP was for, did you say 3, what Bill said 3 years on the, what they were talking about?
Yeah.
Was she on a Head Start?
Yeah.
Split gonna be able to make it? No,
We're in that rural area too. The state board for, it's gotta be on top of it.
Yes, yes, they're gonna approve it today, and then we'll take it to state board, and I will do everything I can to get action on first reading. I can't promise it, but I'll advocate for
Go
it.
to the primary
Thing
school
is,
also.
I wanted to do it so that
They don't.
ends June 30th. Audit for next year,
Right.
you know what I'm saying? That just makes
Everything cleaner.
auditing perfect, it makes everything
Right.
One wouldn't.
We like clean audits.
I got
well, that way there, because then I've got to deal with an audit that's gonna have part of the combined. Do it for June 30th.
and I'll
Really clear they
I will
don't.
advocate for it as hard as I can.
Yeah, because we've been just
I even made
pushing it and pushing it.
I mean, I imagine I actually can take your nursing academy.
So, that's right.
They should.
They should say
Everybody.
Good idea. That's good.
Well, I'm hopefully we've got one in.
Oh, I didn't say.
How you doing?
I don't know.
You all right?
Hey, shouldn't we be able to get anything on action on first read from this point forward, or get on the state board agenda?
It should all be consent.
Like, I'm kind of expecting,
I bet you she didn't come
that
in.
managing the state board calendar or getting on the state board calendar should be fairly straightforward.
And if we get through this quicker, then we can go ahead and do closed session before lunch,
Oh, nice, that'd be good.
and then come back in.
I like that.
So whenever you're ready.
So let's go. Is everybody ready? We ready to get back going?
Everybody's back.
All right,
It
let's
says
do it.
Performance committee, but I think it's actually me.
It says performance committee, but we believe it's Stephen. Is that correct?
It's the
It is.
policy committee's policies, right?
Correct.
Okay, and then the afternoon will be the performance committee's policies, but all of this is really under the performance committee, but I was taking some of the work from you in my,
And we've all
Committee.
done the reviews.
wait, is this my, we're not set up committee style,
No.
are we today? Okay. Anyway, all right, let's go through some of these policies. If you remember, we're jumping back into doing these policies where we go through them and I guess eventually gonna go through all the state board's policies and talk about what they would mean to, for charter schools, or whether there needs to be some suggestions or some changes made to them. Let's go ahead and start out, and you've got on your e-board a, document that has all these policies in them with a brief overview so that you don't have to read the whole policy, and also some analysis and recommendation. It's been given. The first one is SHLT-003, and I'll go ahead and speak on this one. This is the School-Based Mental Health Initiative. There has been, the legislature put this on hold, and then there's been a group formed by the superintendent pursuant to the statute to look at this. Linda Lynn serves on that task force, and I serve on that task force. And so we've been working on that together. We've had our first meeting, and I think we have another meeting at the end of this week. And we should have some good recommendations, and I think everybody's gonna be a lot happier with what this task force comes up with than what the initial policy was. I don't know if Kevin has anything he needed to add to that.
Just keep doing the good work you're doing.
All right, so what I recommend then is that we don't discuss SHLT 003 because we'll just be wasting our time because it's going to change.
This was the one that we had a healthy discussion on earlier, wasn't it?
About a year ago, yeah.
Yes.
So the message about additional required meetings and additional required paperwork is at the top of the agenda there, I'm sure.
Yes, it is.
Additional professional development.
And additional cost of additional
Implementation.
staff.
Well, I was gonna say,
Staff.
this was
Yeah.
staffing for a lot of us.
And the other thing we need to make sure about is any extra funding for resource officers, for safety, or anything like that. We just need to make sure charter schools are on that list
Right.
and are as eligible as
Next.
anyone else.
All right, then we'll go on. I know there's a reason why LICN 1, 2, and 7 are highlighted, but I can't remember why. Dr. Deanna Townsend Smith, the person formerly known as Assistant Director, could you explain why?
Yes, so we are recommending that we hold off on any recommendations surrounding LICN 001, 002, and 007, because currently the Pepsi Committee is making recommendations and discussing that at their meeting. And so as soon as those final recommendations come forward with those policies, we will bring those back for your additional discussion or review. But right now, I don't think we should take those on based on how the policy is currently written when that committee has been charged by the legislature to overhaul the licensure policies. So we will let you know as we find out more.
Does someone in OCS have some input into that process right now, or are we completely out of that right now?
So we haven't been attending, but Director Machado has discussed possibly starting to attend those meetings, so that way we are ahead of the game. And
Yes, and we want to have them make a presentation to
Right.
CSAB, maybe as soon as next month, so you can get an update of what is going on.
obviously, I want us to be very protective of being able to hire non-licensed teachers, get them on lateral entry, not only because it's the law now, but the labor market is so tight that traditional schools need to be able to do the same. If they don't, they're gonna have a tremendous shortage of teachers in the next few years. So more flexibility, let's hope, not more, licensure requirements,
Right.
that's the hope.
It's interesting as the Restart School model comes more, I think there's what, 150
It's almost 150.
Restart Schools. They also are very interested, if you see their proposals, in the hiring and freedom of licensure. So they too would be interested, want to keep that flexibility for the Restart model and for charter schools.
All right, so we're gonna then not make any recommendations on LICN 1, 2, and 7. We'll move on to ATND 000, which is an attendance policy. The policy establishes the rules and regulations of the State Board of Education in governing compulsory school attendance and student accounting through the School Attendance and Student Accounting Manual. This policy covers compulsory attendance, ages, requirements for entrance, etc., on through. In the analysis, it says this policy applies to all public schools. Charter schools must comply with the law of compulsory school attendance and should use the requirements for student entrance as a guideline for entry of students into their school. Do we need to make any changes or suggestions on that policy? I think it's a policy that's
think that
fairly
one's pretty
reflective of
standard.
statute, so not a whole lot to do there. All right, we'll leave it be. Then we'll go to, I believe this is a transportation policy, Trans 000. And this deals with, if there is a transportation requirement in IEP, I believe that would apply to charter schools. If it's part of the IEP.
That's federal.
It's federal, so we can't really do anything with that.
Yeah, that's why I'm curious why there's even a policy at the state board for this when it's already a federal requirement. If
It's a policy to make
it's
sure
in the
you're doing
IEP,
it.
it's in the IEP, right?
You're supposed
It's
to.
there probably one
Replication.
time, 15 years ago, somebody said, well, I didn't see it in the policy manual, and so somebody stuck a policy in there. That's my guess.
But I just have a question, this is operational. If the charter school does not provide transportation, do they still have to do this?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anytime an IEP, I mean, IEP kind of rules over everything,
Everything.
Federal
The
dollars
trump card.
even the
all.
Constitution. It feels
Talk to your
like it.
counsel about that.
All right, so we'll leave that one alone. We got one more here.
We're flying.
Before we get into the really fun one, the renewal one, which apparently y'all missed me last month, I saw in the minutes. Y'all couldn't remember
right.
what I
Straighten it
said.
out.
You got it right.
I don't know.
Wow.
Because
Oh,
7
wow.
and 5 look exactly the same to me, so we'll talk
It
about it
was
though in a
changed, but it
second.
wasn't
It
on
was
the
changed.
document. Anyway, we'll get there.
All right, so 006, school bus passengers. This policy is applicable to all LEAs operating school buses, activity buses, and using commercial buses as needed. It's basically training within the first 5 days of school. Is that currently required of charter schools if they provide transportation?
Currently, it's not required of charter schools. They can opt in. It's not anything that they are required to do. So currently, it doesn't apply because the policy specifically says LEA. So this one doesn't apply to charter schools as currently written.
How do y'all, the ones of y'all that provide transportation, do y'all tell the kids, okay, this is how you open the emergency door? This is how you don't sit in the aisle, you know?
It's
They
very
have to,
logical.
they have,
training.
the training with the signals, because now they got the arm out, and they have to go a certain way, and they have to wait until they can cross the road. So, I mean, I think a good transportation team at a school would be doing this anyway.
So it sounds like we don't need to make any
We don't need to
changes.
make it mandatory.
We're never gonna make
Right.
something mandatory if nobody's,
It's not.
Well, where I get concerned is when it requires just more paperwork being
Right.
filled
Right.
out and
Yeah,
signed.
because
And
it says you have
the
to have a
one good thing in the
Check it
policy,
off, have everybody sign.
it says LEA should document the date in which training was provided. So by that wording, it doesn't require that you document. Of course, everyone does the training, it's just the paperwork and documentation we want to keep to a minimum when we have lean staff. I think that's the important thing. So I'm good with it. Don't change it, don't add charters, just let it be.
all right, anybody wanna do anything different? Yeah, we'll let it be then. All right, let's talk about the renewal policy. Seem like the couple things that we need to work out to kind of tie a bow on this policy is, there was discussion about the governance training conducted by the Office of Charter Schools. And we've talked with Dave a little bit about it, and that it was really gonna kind of tie in with the renewal visit. And it was, or gonna be something digital. I think what a lot of the concern is stretching the office too thin by doing all these. But Dave, if you want to speak on that, just to kind of relay to everybody what we talked about, and Alex as well.
I certainly don't want to mandate another requirement for our school boards, but I do think that it would be very healthy if our office provided governance training, at least during the renewal process. We could coordinate it at the renewal visit, because the board has to be there anyway. And we're looking at, it could be an hour training. The board training that I've done or our office has done usually lasts about an hour and a half. It's because people have a lot of questions. But we have found that the schools that, a lot of the schools that struggle, and even some of our stronger schools, that the board turnover changes and they don't really understand maybe what their bylaws are or their things like that. So I would certainly love to see us move towards our office providing governance training to our schools, and I think renewal time is a perfect time to do that, and we could incorporate it during the renewal visit. And we are planning on being able to do this virtually also. We're not talking about dragging your boards to Raleigh for a day to do this, but we would like to be the authoritative source on training. There's a lot of people out doing training. Some are doing it well, but we would like to they hear the information from us. So that's why we were proposing it and willing to do it in any way you feel is appropriate.
Okay. Any thoughts?
Could be suggested, or again, I'm not advocating mandating anything.
Well, I mean, I think it's a good idea, because you do have turnover. I mean, a lot of times, especially after a 10-year cycle, you may not have any board member that's gone through the renewal, wasn't part of the original thing. And I think y'all do a great job with your training, and I trust you to be able to manage, how you're gonna do it in a way that doesn't bring the office to a screeching halt.
And our thought is not that 100% of the board has to be there either. We would want the majority of the board, so we want to make it as effective and efficient as possible.
Also, I think having it online is the way to go nowadays, because people schedule. Also, I just think it would be a great resource to have, that at any time, whether the renewal process or whatever, you could have it by chapters, and then board members could link onto that, and you could offer it from the Office of Charter School website.
And our office is in the process right now of learning how to facilitate those type of trainings. But yeah. And I think that the board training that I have personally done at our schools has given me the opportunity to meet the board members, and I felt like I developed good relationships, get a lot of calls from them now, so I think both ways are very effective.
All right, anything else on that training? All right, then, we got two that were really kind of technical changes on down on page, oh, the pages aren't numbered.
8.
Page 7, here we go. Page 7, you've got the, where we clarified that composite means grade level proficiency. And then also we clarify in that instead of calling it a framework, We've started calling it a general renewal guideline so that people didn't think that it was like if you had to exactly fall into one of the boxes, because sometimes schools fall into multiple boxes. So we've got that in there. Okay, then I think here's where, at least where I got confused when I was reading it, is the academic piece, or really everything for 7-year and 5-year looks the same, at least on what's on the e-board. They're both no significant compliance issues in the last 2 years. They're both financially sound audits the last 2 years. And they're both academic outcomes have been comparable to the LEA in the immediate preceding 3 years or have met or exceeded growth in the last 2 of 3 years. So they're exactly the same. I think what 7 was is that it's the immediate preceding 3 years or have exceeded growth 2 of the last 3 years, and then have it be meet or exceeded growth last 2 out of 3 years for 5 years. So to get the 7, you needed to exceed 2 years if you weren't comparable all 3. But to get the 5-year, you needed to meet or exceed 2 out of 3 years. So to take the med out, I think that's what we had discussed, and I just think it didn't go over there. Does that sound like what we had discussed?
Not to me. My focus was more on when you have minority populations where you're not equivalent to the LEA, but when you're equivalent to the minority groups or doing better than minority groups, you're losing out in that. I'd rather the focus be on the proficiency, not on the growth. So the wording we had talked about last month, in your sad absence, it really hurt with you not being here, Steve. You have no idea. I think it makes more sense to have the 5-year renewal. Academic outcomes have been comparable to the local administrative unit in the 2 of the last 3 years, and keeping met or exceeded growth last 2 out of 3 years. So the focus is on that discrepancy in proficiency, not necessarily in growth. That's what I think is preferable.
Okay, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. So on the 7 years though, then that's a change, because under the old framework it was exceeded growth 2 out of 3 years. And we've added met or exceeded. What's that?
The old guideline, not
the old
framework.
guideline, sorry.
I much prefer met or exceeded the way it's worded now.
Okay, so then the only difference is
5-year.
Well, if you're only looking at growth, though, I guess here's my question when we come in.
Those are the same.
When we come in and we have 2 schools, and one of them has met or exceeded growth 2 out of 3 years, the other's met or exceeded growth 2 out of 3 years, then they both qualify for a 5 and a 7 because it's an or. So then we just, I don't know, then we kind of don't have a distinction there since you have the or. I think we had said with the 7, if you could exceed growth 2 out of 3 years, or you or have comparable outcomes. I was looking at this, maybe if I'm trying to find the old framework. So 7-year renewable used to be academic outcomes have been comparable to the local school administrative unit at least 2 of 3 years, or have exceeded growth the last 2 out of 3 years. So we've kind of made it looks like we've made the 7 a little bit harder. But then carried under the old one, you only had to be 2 out of 3 years to be comparable. Now you have to be all 3 years, or meet or exceed growth. So we made it easier on the growth, but harder on the proficiency. I really don't understand why we need to change 7 from what it was.
Yeah, I would
and just take what is in 7 and make it there, except for the growth can be a meet or exceed growth 2 out of the last 3 years. I mean, that's just my personal thought. If we're gonna have a 5-year in there.
So could the difference just then be for the 7-year, you have both 2 out of 3 years of proficiency and meet or exceeding growth, and then the 5-year, the relaxation would be or the growth. So you'd have the same wording, the difference being you have to do both for the 7-year, but for the 5-year, you've met one of the 2. Does that make more sense?
Stephen, you're saying.
And also the way we've got the 7-year right now in this draft would qualify them for a 10-year under the statute. So, I mean, I think this is, it's kind of messed up now. I think we messed around with the 7, and by messing around with the 7 now looks too much like the 10, and the 5 looks too much like the 7, and there's no distinction between
The
them.
5 is also, I mean, hey, it's in a pretty achievable threshold, even for a low-performing school. Healthy Start would have qualified for a 5-year under that criteria.
What we will need as you finalize your decisions regarding this policy is just some very clear pieces so that we know what to take forward to polls, et cetera. I think we're just a little bit confused as to where we need to end up with this one. So as you make your motion, if we can get the language clear so we can truly capture it in the minutes appropriately so that we can do what we need.
I'm just saying, you have schools that would qualify as low performing, that would, right, that would be designated low performing, that could qualify as with a 5-year. And they would
Right.
certainly make a strong case that we should have that 5-year charter if that's the threshold. Because you're basically kind of saying, as long as you're financially compliant, or financially sound and operationally compliant, as long as you're making growth, you're good. You're good to get at least a 5-year, which may be fine. I just think the state board is going to also say, this is a low-performing school. Why did it just get a 5-year charter?
Going back to what Joe said, maybe the 7-year or either the 5-year, we have something about the schools comparable instead of just being comparable to the LEA.
I think it's in the statute.
Is that in the statute?
Right. Yeah. We can't mess around with that.
Yeah, I mean, if we did 7, so let's say we did 7, is in the immediate, in 2 out of the last 3 years for comparability, and then 2 out of the last 3 years, or 2 out of the last 3 years meet or exceed growth.
Right.
I thought the problem that we were trying to solve was the desire to have something in between the 7 and the 3.
I think
Right.
so.
And so I wonder,
And
just
really the
not
problem is putting in
touching
the.
7.
I think, well, it's because we've already touched 7. That's why we have no. We had it where 5 was different than 7, but then now 7 and 5 are exactly the same, and that's the problem that we've got. So I mean, the way we go back, if we go back and make 7 the way that it was, where it was 2 out of the last 3 years comparable and exceeded growth 2 out of the last 3 years, and then make the 5 years the way that it is now, which is either, comparable. I think you could even do comparable 2 out of 3 years, or met exceeded growth 2 out of the last 3 years. So then you've got some wiggle room there, but you've made it up there where it's, if you're going to base it just off growth for a 7-year, if it's just going to be based off the growth and not the comparability, not off the proficiency, then you would have to exceeded growth 2 out of the last 3 years. And if you exceeded growth all the last 3 years, then you're a 10-year school. Or if you were comparable for the last 3 years, then you're going to be a 10-year school. So that way you've got some distinction between that 7 and the 5, is to put 7 back how it was, and then for 5 years make it say comparable 2 out of 3 years, or has met or exceeded growth 2 out of 3 years. Does that make sense?
It does.
For 7?
So
No,
there
for
was
5.
But
You
yeah,
leave
because
7
I
the way
think,
it is.
actually leaving
7 will go back
Back
the
the way it
way
was.
that it was under the previous guidelines / framework /
Yeah, because to Joe's point,
Whatever.
you're basically saying, if your school is financially and operationally sound, but growing kids, despite the, but it's still, and is growing kids, even though they're below the LEA, they should receive a 7-year charter. Or growing kids, if we leave in med, it's basically like even if they're just meeting expectations, they
Yeah,
should
well, that's what I'm
receive
saying,
7
if we-
charters.
Yeah, and I'm not so sure that we should.
That's what I'm saying.
I think
the
that's-
Met has to come out of that.
I think the Met has to come out.
Because the growth then becomes your proxy for if you have students that are really coming really far behind to the school, you're basically saying, okay, great. They're really far behind. You have to grow them more than
You have to
than
exceed
average.
that growth. And that Met was not in the old framework. So that was
For the
something that was
7
added
year.
for the 7, but it was for the 5.
Because was there a situation
Well, it does
last
say
year
right
that you
here.
guys wanted this option and that, what was the?
We
gave
started
a
looking at
five-year
we gave
charter.
some 5-year charters, even though there wasn't anything there, and then we thought we want to do it. So here, let me
Well, what was
make,
the difference between the ones that couldn't get the 7 year, but you decided to do the 5 year? What was that?
it was pretty much they were meeting growth instead of exceeding it.
And they were operationally, financially sound.
Okay, so I'll make a motion then. I'll move that for the 7-year renewal, that it be the following. 1, no significant compliance issues in the last 2 years. 2, financially sound audits the last 2 years. And 3, academic outcomes have been comparable to the LEA at least 2 out of 3 years, or have exceeded growth the last 2 out of 3 years. And then, for the 5-year renewal, it would be no significant compliance issues in the last 2 years, financially sound audits the last 2 years, academic outcomes have been comparable to the LEA in the immediately preceding 2 out of 3 years, or has met or exceeded growth in the last 2 out of 3 years.
How are you going to handle low-performing schools? How are we going to handle low-performing schools if we do that?
I think we can still, I mean, if there've been, and then let's add in there, and the school has not been designated as continually low performing.
Ever?
Everything else was the same.
For 7 or 5?
Five?
Five.
Ever?
I didn't say, 7
Right.
does not have meet
Meet.
or exceed, just exceed.
For 2 out of 3 years.
So they're not currently continuing
They're
low
not
performance?
currently continually low performing.
I'll second that motion.
So that should,
All right,
can't
it's been
say it
properly
again.
moved and seconded. Discussion on the motion. So is everybody understanding the big difference here is we're saying for a 7-year charter, you can either, you're getting your charter through operational and financial, compliance, and either being better than the school district or growing kids at a higher rate than happens across the state consistently. So 2 out of 3 years. And to get a 5-year charter, you're financially and operationally sound, and you're growing. You're at least meeting kind of state averages for growth, and you're not low performing.
and just for clarification, that you're not low performing also goes with the 7-year as well. Although, I guess if you exceeded growth 2 out of 3 years, you wouldn't
Right,
be
you wouldn't be
continually
low
low performing.
Okay, so
Can
we don't have to put it in that one.
Can we get clarification on the exact definition of continually low performing?
So I have it.
D or F 2 out of 3 years and not exceeded growth.
Correct.
So you either did not meet met growth and were a D or an F for 2 out of 3 years.
I mean, that's going to toss out a lot of schools anyway, out of the 5-year.
Let's go push them down into the 3s. And a continually low performing school really doesn't need to get more than a 3.
If you take the word continual for its definition, why wouldn't it be 3 out of 3 years? Why is it 2 out of 3 years? I think that's where the problem is.
You gotta ask that people over there.
Legislature. Continually low performing means continuous. That means 3 out of 3 years you didn't meet or exceed growth, and you didn't.
Well, they might have been low performing, and then they weren't, then they were again.
There's no rhyme to
2 out of those 3 years.
reason.
And just remember, these are guidelines, not frameworks.
Right.
So, I mean, we could look and a school could, have just barely been continually low, or just barely been low performing in year 2 of this, and then in year 3, they exceeded growth and they, were within 6 points of the LEA, and we say, okay, they don't need a 3, they need a 5. I mean, we can do that. So.
And just to add to Vice Chair Walker's point, on the previous page, you do have the language that says the Charter Schools Advisory Board may make an alternate recommendation to the State Board of Education not included in the general renewal guidelines. So you do have that language added in there.
All right, so we've got a motion then in a second. Do we have any discussion? Any further discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Is this
Opposed,
just
no?
the policy committee or everyone?
This is everybody.
Everybody.
All right, so the ayes have it. And then that basically is all that is in the policy that's been changed. So do we need to make a motion now to recommend this to the state board? All right, I move that we recommend to the state board that they adopt the renewal policy as amended by the Charter School Advisory Board.
So we're putting this guideline, it's inside
In the
that,
policy.
as it was before.
I second it.
All right, we got a motion, second. Any other discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. We're done with renewal policy. Never want to see it again.
Till
My head
September.
hurts now.
It'll come back up, Stephen.
I know.
No.
So we could
Let's
jump into
see
Joe's
what we
thing.
can jump ahead to here. Joe, can we jump into performance committee stuff? Because we got our school presentation that we need to do. I'd like to wait on closed session if possible.
I believe we can.
So I'm thinking maybe we could do performance committee now, and then maybe even planning for the next meeting.
That would get us out of here.
I just need a motion to amend the agenda.
Okay. I'm gonna make a motion to amend the agenda. Do I even, can I make a motion?
You can.
I don't normally do that.
No one.
But I'm
Just need
gonna
someone to-
move that we amend the agenda. And
The 215
tackle,
Performance Committee will move to this part of the agenda. I'll second that.
okay. All in favor?
Yes, sir.
Aye.
All right, great.
Okay, the first policy we're gonna discuss is Test 002. And I believe it's on page 18 of the document. Defining the role of the test coordinator in testing. Any particular feelings on this? We all have testing accountability coordinators that we're required to have. So I don't think this tells us anything new. The word charter's not in there, but we have to do it, so.
Yes, the biggie for us as charters, Joe, is we don't need to be included in this.
I agree.
Because as a counselor, it is one of my huge duties. For LEAs, they're not allowed to do that. So it puts more restrictions on us if we're included. So let's
Agreed.
not touch it.
So we do not want charters to be included in this specific policy.
Great.
Keep that as is, that's our recommendation.
Do we need to give reasons for our recommendations? Because I'm just concerned, and I don't know how this is gonna be presented. It's gonna be in the minutes.
And when Director Machado, when he makes the presentation, he will detail fully what your recommendation is. And furthermore, since Chair Quigley is responsible for delivering the recommendations of the CSAB, we'll make sure that materials are prepared so that he can clearly articulate the reasons for no changes, alternate recommendations, etc. So that will be detailed out.
Because I could foresee them saying, oh, well, we do think they need to be in, and the state board, make it mandatory. I mean,
Sure they
that
can.
can happen.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that we have very strong reasons why, and I think what you just said is a very strong reason why we don't need to have another staff person if we have a small charter school.
And their response could be the reason they put this in place in the first place. Guidance counselors need to be focused on guiding kids, giving counseling to kids, and they shouldn't be test coordinators, so that they could do what they want. But our recommendation should be that our staffs are too lean. We don't have a central office to assist with these things, and we have to have that flexibility to delegate and wear many hats.
Right, and that's what I was gonna say, Joe, so, I prefer to be referred to as a student support service person.
Yeah.
Because I have many, many
Right.
aspects.
And maybe we need to talk about this at a different time. I'm just concerned, how is it gonna be presented to the state board? Are we opening Pandora's box with this?
Well, the reason, just to recall, the reason why we took on this task was because, several discussions happened at the state board level that said that they were not sure, they needed to have a further discussion around which policies applied to charter schools and which policies did not. And so at the time, the previous executive director in the state board office gave us the charge of going through all the policies and delineating which one applied to charters and which one didn't. And then we took the additional step of saying, since statute says that the Charter School Advisory Board must make recommendations, all things charter, that we bring it to you guys for you to give a final recommendation based on the body of evidence that we have solidified. And I think the next best step to this piece will be, all right, we've discussed all these policies, bring back your recommendations to all of them. And then when you get it in a really good place, say, these are our recommendations. These are the, if you want to add any additional comment as to the reasons why, we can have staff in OCS work to point out your original recommendations, what you outlined, and if there's anything additional that needed to be added prior to this going to the state board, we can work to make that happen.
We just need to make sure we do a lot of preparation before it goes to the state board, because I can foresee a Pandora's box being open. Because there are some people that want every regulation.
I think in a presentation, we need to defend why we feel like this does not pertain to charter schools based on statute or flexibility and all that. Yeah.
Because the default is that we should not have to.
Yes, unless.
That should be our default.
Correct.
Correct.
And speaking of that, that's a great segue into Test 003, because I had a chuckle when I read this one, because Thomas Jefferson Classical Academy is the only charter school in the history of the state that checked the little box on the application that said, no, we won't be using state tests, we'll use an alternative model. Here's our alternative model. And, the application wasn't updated to current policy at the time, and it caused quite the harangue, as you could imagine. So I chuckled when I read this. Personally, for flexibility reasons, I think we should be allowed to administer alternative tests. I know it takes a lot of work to do that, but this is kind of what we're stuck with, so I don't think we have much say on Test 003. It does already include charters in there. We all have to do EOC and EOG exams.
When you
We
find a
might
way,
be able to.
when you find a way, let me know, Joe.
Well, do we know how many charter schools have to use an alternative test because the EOGs do not give them the information they need?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of schools, traditional as well as charter, that do alternative assessments because of that very reason. NWA MAP is one of the biggest ones in the state. There's several others that are being used because EOG is after the fact data that doesn't give you the information that you need for current instruction. So, that's a debate at a lot higher paid grade than ours, I guess.
Well, I think you've been on a committee trying to help with that, haven't
Oh,
you?
man, I wasted a year of my life on that one.
Right.
We tried.
Yep.
My good friend Buddy Collins couldn't take it anymore. I guess we find out tomorrow if he made the next step, huh? Isn't he running for an office? Correct? Okay.
At large.
So I would assume the recommendation for Test 003 is leave as is.
As is.
Okay. And we have grad 004, another graduation requirement.
And we really can't do anything about that one, Jen.
Right, those are minimum requirements that need to be on a student transcript for graduation, and I would hope and expect that most schools go beyond that, if anything.
I was just they were talking about this at the state board meeting last month, about credit recovery and grade point average. Is there the lowest grade point, is there a minimum grade point average in the state that you have to have to graduate?
0.
0, okay.
I mean, haven't we had people graduate with zeros?
Well, you'd have to have a little higher than that to have passed all the courses.
Yeah,
What
you
if you
wouldn't
didn't
have
have
passed.
credit recovery?
True that.
So you don't get GPA points for
No,
credit
No,
recoveries.
pass, fail. That's true, Stephen.
Wow.
I've just heard of people graduating with zeros.
Yeah, that means every core class they would have.
Really
done
makes you
core-
feel like your diploma's worth something.
I just
Well,
wanted to
nobody
know.
really, I mean, on your diploma, your GPA is not listed.
I know, but people always wonder, is this one of the ones that had a 4.0 or a 0?
Because it's only on your transcript, right?
Yeah.
But I just wondered if there was, I didn't think there was.
You have to meet a
You have to take the
minimum number of
courses.
courses. Pass a minimum number of courses.
The good thing in this policy for charter schools, it just has a general guideline of what credits, not when they need to be offered year by year, all that kind of thing. So schools have a lot of
Although
flexibility.
testing kind of mandates that.
Not necessarily.
You know, you have to have biology done by X semester and math one, but that kind of falls out anyways.
So I believe the recommendation is no change to grad 004. Yes?
Correct.
Okay. Now we get to all the good third grade stuff that was recently passed by the legislature. KNEC, I was trying to think of what KNE stands for. Kindergarten?
Something kindergarten,
something?
early childhood. Oh, that's what it is. KN is kindergarten.
Kindergarten, early child, makes sense, yeah. So the first one is KNEC 002, implementation of formative and diagnostic reading assessment. I want us to be very careful with this one, because at least now we have some flexibility in which assessments for K2 are used, and I want to make sure that we don't end up being mandated to do only M class, for example.
And the state actually has a letter that you can send in and
Right.
request whatever you want. So, and this one doesn't specify us in it. It just, it's requiring that these benchmark assessments are in place. But we're not included right now, although we all do this.
So the
Leave
state
it as
board's
it
gonna
is.
say, why shouldn't we include charters in this?
That is my concern. If we
Yeah.
bring this up,
They're gonna
we
keep
need to
saying
have
it.
very, very specific reasons why.
Well, I think they've told us we have to bring it up.
Yeah, we do need to, we can't not bring it. I actually think if we don't bring it up, we risk more of a chance of them just making the
That could
decision
be.
for us. So I think we absolutely need to bring it up.
With this one, our argument would be that we do participate in these assessments, but we have the flexibility of using alternate assessments instead of the state provided.
I guess one concern I have, we're just seeing the overview, and it says the policy outlines the role teachers, administrators have in analyzing, reflecting on assessment data. I mean, I don't know how specific that is in the long wording of the policy. Was that something we should be looking at? Because again, I want to be very careful that we're not putting undue additional burdens on teachers and administrators to jump through some hoops to check off some boxes. I'm concerned about that. Do we know what those policy outlines are in the longer version of this policy?
As we reviewed this, I think our recommendation pretty much surmised what was at the heart of the explicitly spelled out pieces of the policy. And I think anytime we saw the word charter school, or that it applied to a charter school, or that you had some flexibility, we made sure to explicitly state that in our recommendation.
So, you know, my preference would be to not recommend adding charters, to basically leave it as is, but we have to come up with a good reason to help justify why we don't want charters specifically mentioned, even though we're doing all of this. Why would we want charters not to be specifically mentioned? Sensitivity to staffing requirements, is that sufficient?
I would say that, and then I would also probably say your piece on flexibility and the piece in statute that says that, you know, if charter schools should be innovative, et cetera. So I would base it around like the pieces in statute to support your recommendation.
Right. And
I agree with that. We can't be innovative if we're having to do everything the same way. And especially these early years are so formative. And the emphasis that we're placing more on the teacher-child personal learning relationship versus any type of mandatory assessment specified. Because we're holding the schools accountable to performance.
They have to do,
I think that's
they're doing
ultimately
these
the right
assessments
answer.
anyway.
Right.
And I just have one other point of that would probably support this as well, is that in when you make a recommendation to the state board on an application, remember now in your application it fully outlines for schools to talk about the assessments that they're going to do at each grade level, and so that's another piece that you could tie as well.
And ultimately, we're, you know, assessed on accountability. I mean, you know, if we're not getting the job done, we get shut down, where other schools don't. So to me, that's the best reason. So we will recommend to leave as is with those recommendations as to why. And then next is KNEC 16, and it's telling me it won't go there.
That one was kind of in the same vein there, Joe. Required K2 assessments.
My concern, this is going to the kindergarten entry assessment, which is very, very structured. It's very, very time consuming and
Expensive.
well, it's because time's money. Plus, it takes the classroom teacher away from the students. I mean, I've heard lots and lots of concerns about the kindergarten entry assessment. And it was developed under Race to the Top, and there's tons of money that's been given to develop this. If it's great, I think charter schools ought to be able to use it if they want to, but we need the flexibility to not use it.
Amen.
I even have concerns about the way that they are collecting the data on it, because you have to have a device and you can take videos, recordings. Let's see, it's videos, recordings, anecdotal records, or anything, and this is all online. And again, goes back to what we were talking about this morning with rating a 5-year-old.
So leave as is, maintain flexibility. Very good. Next is EXCP 000. Exceptional Children's Programs.
I didn't understand why that was on there, because all that's federal, isn't it?
It's all federal.
And this is just, it's a manual.
I mean, yeah.
So what's the policy? Do you have
Huge
the
manual.
Do you have to have the manual? We all have the manual.
So some of the state board policies link directly to the manual that pretty much guides that, and so the state board likes to make sure that everybody is aware that this is something that is required. So it would be one of those policies, such as like one of your charter school policies that says you must amend your charter application when you want to make changes. That's already codified in the charter agreement, but we want to keep it in front of everybody's mind that this is something that they're required to do.
Okay.
So we're gonna recommend that it says something specific to LEAs and charters in there, because it doesn't even mention that in this, the way this policy is written, it doesn't even say LEAs. Just says refer to the manual.
Yeah,
I think we just leave it as it is.
that one they shouldn't question because
Right.
surely they know we're all following that manual. If not, we get in trouble quickly.
And the last one, I don't think I have on the original list, but it's KNEC 004, Local Alternative Reading Portfolios. Outlines requirements and process through which LEAs may develop their own local alternative student reading portfolio review process. And again, this is all about flexibility. Don't include charters in that. Right, Linda Lynn?
I would agree.
My only question with this is, by not saying anything about this, are we still allowed to do a portfolio?
Yeah, you're still allowed to do it.
That's where the
Yes.
flexibility comes in.
Okay,
We can do it, but don't say we have
Okay.
to do it.
cool. Down with that.
So we are done with those policies. Now we move on to management and support organizations, where we'll pull that one up. Do we need to display that, or everybody have it?
Have these policies gone through rules yet?
Why did we not vote on this one last time, Joe? I can't remember.
We asked to table it.
Weeks will take it to
Let's see.
Wanted to see them one last time before.
Just another look-see?
Yeah, I thought these two looked great. I mean, the only, I don't know if I'm jumping too quick, Joe. The only thing that I saw that was, and it's stylistic more than anything else, and rules would probably do this, is the definition of CMO and then EMO. I would just kind of like reformat one of them so it kind of matches up, where you talk about, so a for-profit organization that contracts with new or existing public school districts, charter school districts or charter schools. And then when you look at CMO though, it has, you know, the EG through a contract with charter schools. I think just to make those just kind of match up grammatically. But I think that's probably some stylistic thing that rules could do rather than us having to hammer that out, because it gets the definition in there right. And the only other, you know, I guess concern is the word operates. And I don't know what Laura Crumpler would have said. Can a CMO operate a charter school? Can an EMO operate a charter school? Or can only the board operate the charter school? And so, I don't know. I'm sorry for bringing Laura back into this. Maybe our two esteemed counselors over there would like to jump in on that. You want me to restate my question so that it's clear?
That was the questions.
Okay, I guess here's,
Board operate, does the
here's my
board?
question, yeah, is we have that both the CMO and the EMO, they operate a charter school. My question is can those groups operate a charter school, or can only a nonprofit board operate the charter school?
I think it's a great question for the Rules Council to consider on May 24th.
Good, then I'm done asking the question.
And I think the other clarifying piece that we felt comfortable with is that by amending the charter application itself to include a statement at the end of each major section that any items that were copied from another application had to be recognized, documented, and that would help us feel more comfortable. That's under replication, I'm sorry.
And those changes,
Yeah.
Mr. Maimoni, are underway with
Okay.
the new application. So we'll either use the same system that we're on, or preferably if we can get the RFP through, we'll use that, so.
Right. And we wanted to make sure for the clarity under the charter support organizations that schools could still go out and contract later on after. This is only if they got specific help.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, I move we recommend to the state board they approve this policy on management and support organizations.
We have a second.
Second.
Second, Sherry Reeves. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. Passes unanimously. The last one is fast track replication. The emphasis on fast track versus confusing with replication.
I think this one looks really good. I like the flipping the things around for the model and replication at the start.
And Sherry made the very good points about not including North Carolina for groups that operated outside of North Carolina. So we got those corrections in there. Very good catch.
Thought everything looked good.
You've got or in both of them, which is good.
I move we recommend the state board adopt the amended fast track replication policy.
I'll second that.
So we have a
All right.
motion, properly seconded again. Do we have any further discussion? I guess it's part of what we do as a charter advisory board, but does anyone think that we need to be specific about facilities in a fast track application? Does that not need to be part of this?
Which one was it a piece of, Joe? It is a piece
It's a
of
piece of acceleration.
acceleration.
I mean, I almost think it's kind of a given with fast track.
Okay.
Because most of those, just as a reminder, most of those, we haven't had any standalone schools without the support of an EMO pursue this avenue yet. But most of our schools that have pursued fast track, we only have one that has carried it all the way through.
Who was that, Deanna?
Cardinal. Now
Now they've hit all kinds of
Right.
trouble.
They haven't carried it through.
They haven't carried it through.
we don't know yet.
So how many fast
approved by
tracks
the
have
state
had
board.
facility issues so far?
They would
We've
be
only
the,
had one.
we've only had one that's approved, so,
So 100%.
100%.
They were the ones who came to us in August,
correct.
but now they've got a hiccup.
But we haven't received did we receive an official request?
Not an official.
Received an official request to delay yet, so.
They're running into local government issues.
And we did that so that they wouldn't run into the local government issue.
I love local government, but it's
sheriff.
starting to get to be a trouble in some of these schools that are approved, and the state has said, here is your charter, and you can operate, and or at least we preliminarily approved your charter, and then they run into issue after issue, whether it's zoning, or whether it's something with transportation, or whether it's, like Discovery getting sued by all the homeowners, which that's not really local government, but still, I guess we're a charter-friendly state, but we've still got a long ways to go in some facets of government to really be charter-friendly.
This is a reminder to our legislature too, that facilities are becoming a greater and greater burden and issue to charter schools in a very hot construction market right now, so.
Probably be great for state capital funds to be shared with charter schools, don't you think, Mr.
Amen,
Mann?
brother. Amen. You're talking my language now.
And maybe even just an option. And maybe just an option that county commissioners, if they wanted to, could provide some capital funding to charter schools.
Amen, amen.
Maybe through the lottery.
Yeah.
Or maybe lottery money, that would
Yeah,
be
the
nice too.
lottery money would be nice.
I mean, if we're gonna gamble anyway, we might as well share it with all the kids.
That's right.
Wow.
And we had a motion and a second, but no vote.
Lots of good discussion.
Yes.
Okay, all in favor of moving the fast track replication forward, recommendation to the state board, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you.
Do we have time? I could just bring up something.
We got lots of time, we're way ahead of schedule.
Are we, okay, good. That's what I
Right,
thought this might
Alex?
be a good.
Yeah, we're good.
No, bring it. It's recently come to my attention how NC pre-K slots are given in the state to our lower income families. And so I was talking to, at a school with a family that was an NC pre-K parent. And I'd just like to share, because I told her, I said, I really want you to put it into words what your experience was, because like you were saying, local controlled government, NC Pre-K, those are 5-year-olds that are coming up into, that could have school choice options. And so anyway, let me read this and I will tell you what I did from this. It says, as a past NC Pre-K parent, I can tell you their flat out discouragement of school choice. They push your district school. Both of my children received a packet toward the end of the pre-K with information of their zone school. The enrollment forms and the school physical form, which you meant the medical, go into kindergarten. When I specified that I didn't need it because my child was already enrolled to start at a charter school, it was not only discouraged but bashed. They of course pushed the obvious transportation and lunch concern. However, after telling the director that I was confident in my decision, I received a call from a woman at the main office. Again, the goal was to discourage me from sending my child, but also from recommending it to other families in the class, particularly Latinos. As I was told, the goal of charters was to segregate schools. My son's good buddy at the time was grouped as an ESL student because his parents' first language was Spanish. However, he only spoke English. His parents were made to believe that there was no place in a charter school for, and I quote, a child like that. That really concerned me, coming from NC Pre-K, as children are now allowed the opportunity to have opportunity scholarships and charter schools. So I went to one county just to see if they would give a flyer out to the NC Pre-K students, and that's still under discussion. They are not even sure that they would pass out a flyer to the NC Pre-K parents telling them that here are your charter schools in your county and here are your private schools that take opportunity scholarships. I just didn't know if there were any other thoughts here at the table. Have you dealt with, I was just talking with Sherry, and she has a very good partnership with their NC Pre-K. I was astonished when I went and tried to get this done at a county. And there's no regulation or rule, but has anybody else had any kind of concern? And I know some counties, only the LEA controls these slots. So, was there any other thoughts about that?
I'm not sure what we can. I've experienced this to some degree with like Healthy Start or Head Start in the Durham County. Head Start has been. They have actually been helpful, but it takes a lot of relationship building because naturally those kids are getting transitioned to traditional public schools.
We have the B3 commission that's meeting right now. I was wondering if the Charter School Advisory Board would want to make a statement or encourage them to have the NC Pre-K, whoever the contracting agent is, to strongly encourage or whatever we could do to at least let these NC Pre-K parents be aware of opportunity scholarships and also the charter schools in the area. Because these are the parents that probably have the least information available to them, that there are other options.
I mean, I think that, to me, that seems reasonable. To say if you're gonna take the state's pre-K money, that you make sure that you tell the students, okay, you can go to the district school, you can apply for an opportunity scholarship, you can apply to go to a charter school. And, you know, and to give, and to make sure that they understand those options, because especially, and we did this with the, we had a Hispanic charter school task force we looked at, and one of the things we found out is a lot of people in the Hispanic community thought, oh, you've got to pay to go to these schools, or, you know, it's a merit-based thing, or, you know, and not understanding the way charter schools operate. And so I think, you know, anytime that you've got students that are there that you could, you know, share it, because it's not like you're saying, it's not like you're going to the district school and saying, you know, when the kids are already in kindergarten, now you got to tell them now next year they could do this. But I think it would be a good idea for them to tell them and let the parents make this, make the decision for the child.
That's why, since it is a government agency, I mean, NC Pre-K, since that is, you should let them know. What do you think then are our steps to try to get that where it's known that they need to do that? Do you think the B3 commission?
You need to go to Erica Berry, the superintendent senior policy advisor. She's the one who's in charge of that. She'd probably be happy to do that. She ran a charter organization in Mississippi So she'd probably be pretty happy to do that. I think the superintendent would also support that. So she's in Lindsay Wakely's old office.
Okay.
I'll give her a heads up.
Okay. Just a little FYI, the state of Tennessee's had the same problem with this, and now the legislature has mandated that just the directory information, the name of the child, the address, that information be given to charter schools. Now, they don't have opportunity scholarships there, but charter schools, so that charter schools can reach out to these parents that are 4-year-olds and send a letter and say, we'd welcome you to come to the school. That's, some of the schools are complying, some schools are taking Tennessee to court for requirements.
When that law first passed, and I met with the lady that was over the NC pre-K, and she said that because I asked that a lot of the agency are controlled by the LEAs, and she said if these seats weren't being opened up to charter schools, that she wanted to know about it, so she would enforce that. But I understand she's not there anymore, but I think that's a case where I probably need to reach back out to her or her replacement to tell her about that. And then with Erica's help, we hopefully can get something accomplished.
That would be good. So that way it's consistent.
Yes.
This also would help our ED numbers, I think. Charter schools.
It could.
Thank you.
All right. So we're right on time. It looks like 11:35. Great. So we have another order of business. We have something I'll need a vote for. It's a resolution. And so I'm going to go ahead and read this. This is the North Carolina Charter School Advisory Board resolution honoring Deanna Townsend Smith for outstanding service to the Office of Charter Schools and the Charter School Advisory Board, March 2013 to April 2018. So, and it reads, whereas the North Carolina Charter School Advisory Board takes pride in the extraordinary qualities and dedication of the citizens who have served public education through service to the Office of Charter Schools and the Charter School Advisory Board, and whereas Dr. Deanna Townsend Smith has reflected these qualities in an exceptional manner during her service to the Office of Charter Schools and Charter School Advisory Board as consultant and assistant executive director, and whereas Deanna Townsend Smith's commitment to North Carolina's constitutional promise that the people have a right to the privilege of education, and it is the duty of the state to guard and maintain that right, is evidenced through her work to make quality public school options available to the children of North Carolina. Whereas the Charter School Advisory Board is grateful for her dedication to ensuring all members are supported and prepared for the complex issues before them. Whereas the Office of Charter Schools and Charter School Advisory Board recognize Deanna Townsend Smith's friendly demeanor and good nature, reflecting her genuine heart and consideration for those around her. Now therefore be it resolved that the Charter School Advisory Board expresses its highest praise and heartfelt appreciation to Dr. Deanna Townsend Smith for her tireless and unselfish service and dedication, and resolved that the board wishes Godspeed to Deanna Townsend Smith as she continues her dedicated service to children, families, and educators of North Carolina through her new role. Resolved that the board directs the Secretary of the Charter School Advisory Board to enter a copy of this resolution into the official minutes of the Charter School Advisory Board, and that an appropriately signed copy be presented to Deanna Townsend Smith, who served with dedication and grace. So, can I get a motion? Can I get a motion?
I'll make that motion.
I will second.
All right.
If I vote against this motion, she can't leave, right?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We have a special lunch for you. Let you come with us.
Let's get you want to do a picture after lunch?
Yeah, we do that.
Yeah, okay, great. We got a special lunch.
Thank you so much.
You're the best. Everybody loves you.
I'm not gonna cry today.
Well, I would really be crying if she was leaving the building. I'm crying, but she's gonna be here.
But I contact her all times of the night and everything.